Someone told me, I don't think this is true, but it's all a Chamber of Commerce plot. Because you get on Sharon and you don't know how to get off of it, and you just stop and you buy a house, and Charlotte grows.
Welcome into Queen City News Plus. I'm Alicia Barnes, and I want to welcome you in to Local Roots. This is a history show, so if you just moved to Charlotte and you just want to learn more about history, or if you've lived here your whole entire life and history is your thing, this is the show for you. So we have an exciting guest lined up today and an exciting show for you. I call this show Streets of Gold because from what I understand is every road leads to a story and some lead to gold. So let me welcome our guest in right now. We have Dr. Tom Hanchett, urban historian. I feel like everybody in Charlotte knows you, Dr. Hanchett. When you talk about history, of course, you're with History South. I want to just say thank you so much for being here because it really means a lot. And also Dr. Todd Herman, who is the president and CEO of the Mint Museum. Todd, I'm just excited that you are here because I've heard you speak several times, and I feel like you have so much to be able to give in terms of not only art history, but also just what it brings to the Queen City and the Mint Museum. So let's get started. I want to be able to talk about first the roads of faith. Dr. Hanchett, if you want to let us know, because what I understand is so many of the roads, when you just ride around the Queen City, have a meaning, and there's a connection and also a faith connection, and also some lead to gold.
That is absolutely true. Let me back up for a minute and give you a mental picture of the roads we're talking about. We're talking about the center, what's now the center part of Charlotte, even though as recently as the 1940s, we go pretty far out. Imagine the center of Charlotte, the hub of an old-time wagon wheel. And you've got spokes coming out at various different places. And when you have that in your head, then you go, oh, okay, Beatties Ford Road, that's a north spoke. Providence Road, that's a south spoke. Central Avenue, that's an east spoke. West Boulevard is a west spoke. That's right. and so that's kind of the place that we're looking at. Early on, when folks were settling here, when folks were coming over from Europe, a lot of them were Scots-Irish, a lot of them were Presbyterians. And so the people that started building the built environment, one of the first things they did was to build churches. And so a number of the spokes and a number of other streets within that wagon wheel have to do with Presbyterian churches.
Any stories that you find to be fascinating that you just of digging through the history and learning that you think people should know?
One of the ones is Sugar Creek Presbyterian Church, which is also spelled Shugaw, S-U-G-A-W. Both of those are correct. There was evidently a Native American word that sounded a little like sugar or Shugaw that meant gathering place. And so the very first of the Presbyterian churches, Sugar Creek Presbyterian or Shugaw Creek, is on North Tryon Street, which was the Native American trading path. It was the reason that people tended to move through our area, and some of them stopped in what became Charlotte. But the cross street is Sugar Creek Road. And today it's one of the most diverse parts of Charlotte. There's a 1755 church sitting up on the hill there. Right across two of the streets are cemeteries, which date from the years when the United States was being invented. But right across is a Compare grocery store, Latino grocery store. And right next to that is a renovated shopping center with a new independent picture house. So you've got pretty close to 300 years of history all of a sudden at that corner around Sugar Creek Presbyterian Church.
It's very cool. We always talk about landmarks. What really sticks out to you in terms of the history that you feel like, you know what, kind of cool, but people don't really know this?
Well, the old buildings, the old church buildings, were often without steeples. The Presbyterians were not into all that fancy stuff that the Episcopalians, the Church of England, was into. And so the churches that have been changed the least are very simple rectangular boxes. One that I love going to is Poplar Tent Church, just outside of Charlotte. But if you're heading on 85 going east, about the first exit past the big shopping mall is Poplar Tent Church. And if you get off there, it's a beautiful, simple, it's elegant in its simplicity, brick church. Poplar trees were there. There were enough of them that initially they just kind of cut the trees off and put a roof over them. That's a term in some churches for a worship in the out in nature, if you will, and then eventually replaced by the brick church sometime in the 1800s. I think about that because not everybody thinks steepleless churches are great. I do. But the Sugar Creek Presbyterian Church in the 1970s, they had a campaign to do a bunch of stuff that they needed to do with the church. And they said, real churches have steeples. And so, here's this wonderful brick box, harmonious in its simplicity, that now has a big steeple on the front.
Wow.
Because somebody in the 1970s thought that was cool. It's all cool. It's all history. It's all stories.
When you hear these stories, Todd, what comes to mind? I mean, you know a little bit about Charlotte history, and especially how it leads to, Trade Street, Tryon Street, these names that we hear, long streets.
Right. And so far, I mean, I'm so excited to be here with Tom because I've already learned at least 2 to 3 things in just sitting here in these first 5 minutes. One, the meaning of Chagall or Segal Street. And also that Charlotte is basically a wheel with spokes.
Right.
So thinking of it that way, because someone who is directionally challenged like I am, moving to Charlotte with all of its very similar names and streets that seem to go around in circles.
Yes.
It's a challenging city for a person like me. So now that I have a visual, because I am a visual person, now that I have a visual, I think it will be easier for me to sort of navigate this city. So this has already been a huge benefit to me to be here today.
I want to ask you, in terms of street names, just as Todd just mentioned, I mean, there's some that are just like you think Trade, Tryon, things like that. But and they also lead to churches. But then also we'll talk about with the Mint, how some of the places and locations find themselves on these particular streets. As we're traveling through Uptown, through the area, Dr. Hanchett, is there anything that you can tell us about why there's those particular names?
The big street, the one that is still our main street, is an old Native American trading path called the Nations Path. And it kind of glued together the Indian nations in the lower right-hand corner of this continent from South Carolina, Georgia, up to the James River, which was a great trade navigation thing in the Richmond area. And when European settlers started to cluster along that, the colonial governor gave permission for people to lay out straight streets and town lots, as they called it. Charlotte loves real estate development. It's great we started as a real estate deal. And that is the beginning of Charlotte in the colonial records, 1768.
We have about 1 minute to answer this question, but I have to get this in. Sharon Amity Road. Anything you know about Sharon Amity Road or Sardis Road or Carmel Road or Steel Creek Road that comes to mind that we should make sure that we get in?
Churches. All of them
churches
are named, almost all of them are named for churches.
Wow.
Can we get back to that later on?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful.
For right now, we are going to take a bit of a break, but we have so much more to be able to come on the other side of this break. So stay with us as you're watching Local Roots. All right, welcome back into Local Roots. I call this edition Streets of Gold, and we're learning how so many streets in the Charlotte area really lead to gold. And so one of the big things we have to talk about is the Mint, because there's a fascinating story not only behind the history, but how we got here. So Dr. Todd Herman, who is the president and CEO of the Mint Museum, I'm so happy that you're here. Kind of give us the layout of all this, of what we need to be able to know, and how the Mint became the Mint, and they actually did mint.
Yeah, it's a great question. And coming to Charlotte from out of town, I had to learn a lot about the history of the Mint Museum, how it got started, and I did learn, which is something many people don't know, is that the Mint Museum was the very first art museum in the state of North Carolina. And the second thing I learned was that many people believe that the Mint Museum, they don't initially associate it with a mint, like printing money. They would say to me things like, "Oh, is there really a museum in Charlotte dedicated to spearmints and peppermints?"
Wow.
And I say, well, okay, so I get it. I mean, there's an ice cream museum and there's a candy museum and all
Right.
these things, right? So I understand where that line of thinking is coming from, or who is the Mint family. So once I explained that it was actually a U.S. mint, then the wheels start turning, and then people want to ask sort of more questions because that's not just a simple named after a family or named after chewing gums or
Right.
mints.
Or peppermint
So
patties.
yeah, or peppermint patties. So the original mint, the actual U.S. mint, was built in the 1830s here in Charlotte on Mint Street.
It
Right.
made sense.
It makes-
Briefly.
Exactly. So people, I mean, that's another thing. People's eyes get really big, like, "Oh, is that why that's called Mint Street?" I'm like, absolutely. So it lived as a U.S. mint for a period of time because gold was discovered here in Charlotte. And so printing the coins at the place where the gold is being mined made a lot of sense at the time. In the early 20th century, it ceased being a mint, and the U.S. Post Office, which was next to it, wanted to expand. So they decided that the Mint building would be torn down.
This is Charlotte.
This is
Right.
So Charlotte.
And give us the location so people can understand what we're talking about, where all this is happening.
on the original Mint
The
Street.
original Mint Street.
I'm not sure what is exactly there now.
It's
on that street.
now the federal court building.
Okay.
Okay, there you
Various
go.
columns and all of that.
Oh, so so it was replaced with something very elegant and also historic in a way. So it had started to be demolished, the building, the U.S. Mint, and as often happens with the initiation of museums in the U.S., a group of ladies got together and said, "You know what? We need an art museum in our city of Charlotte, and here's a building which is being, it's partially torn down at the moment. We're going to get land donated, which the land was donated, which is where we're located now off of Randolph Road. And so that building and its, the rubble was purchased and moved to its current location, rebuilt,
Wow.
and became the Mint Museum.
Dr. Hanchett, you said it's so typical of Charlotte. What do you mean?
Oh, we just seem to love tearing stuff down. The original discovery of gold was about 25 miles east of town down Albemarle Road. Look for the state brown markers that invite you to come to the Reed Gold Mine. Kid named Conrad Reed was playing in a creek, found a 25-pound rock that glittered, and everyone knew that there was no gold in North America. People have been looking ever since Columbus, and he took it home. They used it as a doorstop until a jeweler came along, offered him $3.50 for it. And at that point, the main mint is in Philadelphia, right? Yeah.
Correct. First.
And so the folks in Philadelphia say, like you said, we got to have our gold processing facility closer to where it's all happening. So that's the beginning of the mint.
Fascinating. And then fast forward, then we also have the mint that's in Uptown. And how that came, just explain all that.
Well, and the Mint Uptown building was built, it opened in 2010 and was an initiative that was part of a larger sort of cultural push to construct at the same time the Beckler Museum of Modern Art, the Mint Museum Uptown, the Night Theater, and the Gant Museum. So all of us are right there in the Levine Center for the Arts. And at that time, the Mint Museum also had the Mint Museum of Craft and Design,
Right.
which was located further down Tryon in the old Montaldo's building, which is now the location of the Foundation for the Carolinas.
Mhm.
So we moved out of that building, the Craft and Design Museum moved out of that building and was incorporated into the new Uptown building that opened in 2010 with a beautiful exhibition by Romare Bearden.
Yeah, which that will transition to another one of our shows with Romare Bearden, because when you look at, and Dr. Hendry, you can tell us quickly too, that you have Romare Bearden Park, and his name is all over the Queen City. I mean, anything that you want to let people understand?
Major African American artist in the 20th century, did all sorts of different kinds of. He even had a hit record at one point, but his real fame, at least in our part of the world, comes from collages that he did very late in his life, remembering visiting his grandparents in the area where Truist baseball field is. He was at that point part of the Harlem Renaissance, and there's now a stamp out, and they called it the Mecklenburg series. And so it was looking back at this period in all of our history when we're transitioning from farms to the modern era. But you could feel the heart in those things. And the new mint, as I still call it, even though it's been around for quite a while now, honored that with Bearden materials always on display. And there's this wonderful new park right next to the baseball stadium that honors Romare Bearden.
And we have about 30 seconds left in this segment, Todd, but tell us really quickly in terms of how people can be able to see Romare Bearden at the Mint.
Right. So as Tom just mentioned, we have always at the Uptown Mint building a gallery dedicated to the work of Romare Bearden. And in fact, you mentioned his hit song. We currently have on view the record and the sheet music for that song. Because I, as you say, I mean, a lot of people just don't realize that he was a musician.
Cool.
I mean, he was great. And his nephew, Charles Alston, is also a very significant African-American artist. And then another sort of local artist celebrity is John Biggers from Gastonia, who is a major artist, a major African-American artist. So those three come from this area, and all three of them are international stars.
Wow. Well, I promised Dr. Hanchett that we're going to get back to the churches and talk about the history here in the Charlotte area. So that will come as we just take a quick break right now, and we will come back to you very shortly with so much more on Local Roots on Queen City News Plus. Welcome back to Local Roots. I call this episode right here, Streets of Cold. Dr. Hanchett, I'm going to just pass it on over to you and tell us, there's so much about the churches here in the Queen City and how that connects to all this.
Well, the folks who settled here from Europe, a lot of them were Scots-Irish, a lot of them were Presbyterians. First buildings, big buildings, landmark buildings were churches. Charlotte doesn't have, a big river running right through the middle of town or a mountain or something like that. And so a lot of the names of the roads are because they go to a particular church. Sugar Creek Presbyterian, mentioned that earlier. Sugar Creek Road, Steel Creek Presbyterian from 1760, Steel Creek Road out by the airport. Most of the surrounding community there has been torn down, but the beautiful building is still there. Mentioned Poplar Tent in Cabarrus County now. Providence Road goes from the center of town out to Providence Presbyterian Church, except today there's a hiccup because there's so much traffic on Providence Road that they created a kind of a half circle go round. And to get actually to the 1858 church, beautiful church at Providence, you go to Providence Church Lane. But Sardis Presbyterian Street is named for that. Amity, there's an Amity Place as well as Sharon Amity. Talk about that in a minute. And then one that I thought was a church named for a street, turned out it was the other way around. In the Bible, there's a thing about Sharon in the Holy Land, and the nearest landmark in the Holy Land is Mount Carmel. And so near the Sharon Presbyterian Church, people had made a Carmel Road 1962, new church about to open. What shall we call it? Carmel Presbyterian. So
Wow.
most of the roads are named for churches, but every once in a while, a road is. You get
It's fascinating.
it.
I mean, isn't it?
Oh, well, yes.
And a lot of it's like you might know one fact, but then it's like I love how he connects the facts. That you're like,
Right.
oh wow, I have heard that before.
I mean, you might have thought, well, maybe one,
Mm-hmm.
right? But to understand that it was actually a design concept,
Right.
right? Naming the streets for the churches, because I don't know. I mean, you probably do know if another city has a similar.
Good question. I don't know.
Because I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It's very interesting. I find it fascinating because for somebody who is not from Charlotte, I get here and feel like, was there a plan? Because it just kind of seems like, especially with the traffic that we have on the roads and how they connect. Anything else history-wise do you want people to?
Can I hit you with the Sharon thing?
Mhm.
It's my favorite question. Who the heck was Sharon, and why are all the streets named after her? And
Okay, well,
Sharon was not a person. Sharon was a place
I'm glad I didn't
in the
answer.
Holy Land. Probably Sharon, the plains of Sharon, in the shadow of Mount Carmel. And when folks built the church down near what's now South Park Mall, they were inspired by the book of Isaiah, chapter 35. The desert shall rejoice and blossom. The glory of Lebanon shall be given, the majesty of Carmel and Sharon, where you shall see the glory of the Lord, the majesty of our God.
Hmm.
Sharon shall become a pasture for flocks, a place for my people who have sought me.
Wow.
And that is the Sharon Church. You can find it just south of South Park Mall, the corner of Sharon View Lane. Sharon View was a country club out there. The reason there was a country club out there was the former governor of North Carolina, Cameron Morrison, built a mansion out that way on Morrowcroft Lane. That's why there's a Morrowcroft shopping center.
Mm-hmm.
And so today, when you are going towards South Park Mall, there are a bunch of different Sharon Roads, Sharon Towers, and all of that goes back to the original Sharon. But someone told me, I don't think this is true, but it's all a Chamber of Commerce plot. Because you get on Sharon and you don't know how to get off of it, and you just stop and you buy a house and Charlotte grows.
So good. Oh, wow.
That's a good theory.
That's a great way to end the conversation. I do want to have final thoughts. So first, Dr. Todd Herman, anything that you want to be able to say as we wrap up this episode of Local Roots?
Well, I would just say that, because the Mint Museum has such a rich history
Mm-hmm.
for North Carolina, but also for this immediate area, I just hope that people do come and experience it, because as you've heard today, all of your listeners and viewers have heard today, history, whether it's art history or American history or European, whatever the history is endlessly fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
There are stories to learn about so many different things that do affect us day to day. And I think hopefully if anything comes out of this, it's people saying, wow, I want to learn more about what's around me and about the world in which I live.
Dr. Hanchett, any closing
Boy,
remarks?
I wish I could talk like that guy.
I know. He's impressive, isn't he? That's why I'm like, hey, you want to come on?
Yeah.
But you're impressive, too.
Seriously, go to the Mint on Randolph Road. The first thing you'll see is what looks like a modern building, because it was renovated in 1985. They added the entrance that you go in. But walk around the back, and you'll see the original 1830s Mint. And if you go into the middle of the building, is there still an exhibit on gold?
That is when you come in on the park side.
Good.
It's called the Heritage Gallery, but we just took it down for the first time in probably 16 years to put up an exhibition of skateboard deck design.
All right. Wow. Well, thank you both for being here with us. You've just enlightened all of us. I think even our producer, Austin, is shaking his head going, wow, this is really fascinating. I want to thank you so much for watching Queen City News Plus and joining us here inside the studio as you see this episode of Local Roots. And I will definitely promise we will have an episode on Romare Bearden because there's just so much to be able to talk about, and hopefully these two will come back and join us. But thank you so much for watching Queen City News Plus. I'm Alicia Barnes.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.